Okay, let's unpack this. How do you give a territory back, to its rightful sovereign owner, but at the same time make sure a really critical military base on that exact territory can keep running, like without interruption for a century?
Yeah, that's the core challenge, isn't it? And it's what this brand new agreement tries to solve. It was just signed May 22nd, 2025.
Very recent.
Exactly. Between the UK and Mauritius. It's aiming to finally sort of resolve this decades-long dispute over the Chagos Archipelago. And that includes, crucially, Diego Garcia.
Right, the strategic island. And for this deep dive, we're working directly from the source, the official UK government document. It's called Mauritius Number 1, 2025 Agreement, presented to Parliament.
Hmm.
It's got the full agreement text, plus all the related notes and letters, the real nuts and bolts.
And it's fascinating because, this isn't just diplomatic paperwork. It feels like it could be a blueprint, maybe, for how former colonial powers and sovereign nations handle these situations.
Strategic assets on disputed land.
Exactly. It hits sovereignty, a huge military base, the human rights legacy for the Chagosians, environmental stuff, economics. It's all bundled together. It's like a snapshot of international relations playing out right now.
Absolutely. So our mission here is to walk you through the core parts of this agreement, pull out the really key pieces. What does it actually say about who controls what?
What are the compromises?
Yeah.
The mechanisms?
Yeah, and what does it mean for the base, the islands, the people? Let's get into it.
Okay.
So let's start with the absolute headline, the big news. It's acknowledged right there in the preamble, recognizing past wrongs, needing to complete decolonization. So Article 1, what's the fundamental shift on sovereignty?
Right. Article 1, this is the bedrock. It states pretty unequivocally, Mauritius is sovereign over the Chagos Archipelago.
The whole thing.
The entirety of it. And yes, importantly, that includes Diego Garcia. It explicitly says it gives regard to international court decisions, the ICJ.
Wow, okay. So sovereignty legally transferred to Mauritius, even Diego Garcia. Hang on, that immediately brings up the big one. Diego Garcia is the massive military base.
Yeah.
How does Mauritius become sovereign there while the UK and implicitly the US keep running this huge strategic facility?
Okay, here's where it gets, well, innovative, maybe complex is the word. Article 2 brings in this concept of authorization.
Authorization.
Yeah, so Mauritius, as the new sovereign power, it authorizes the UK to exercise the specific rights and authorities needed to run the base on Diego Garcia. Long-term, secure, effective operation. And this authorization covers everything needed for defense and security, and it points you to the annexes for all the details on jurisdiction and stuff.
Okay, so Mauritius holds the title, the sovereignty, but the UK gets permission, authorization to run the base. How wide is that authorization? What powers does the UK actually keep on Diego Garcia?
Well, Annex 1 and 2 lay it out, and it's pretty comprehensive for base operations. Think unrestricted access, basing, overflight for UK and US forces, planes, ships. Yeah. Full control over military operations, storing goods, weapons included, deploying their people, having exclusive command over them. They manage the crucial stuff like the electromagnetic spectrum, communication systems.
Right.
They even administer and police Diego Garcia to ensure the base operates. Control access for people and goods related to the base. They can manage and develop the land and water for defense purposes.
But no artificial islands, you said?
Explicitly excluded, yes. And the UK takes full responsibility for the defense and security of Diego Garcia itself.
That sounds like, well, almost total control for the UK for base purposes. So if Mauritius is sovereign, what authority does it actually keep over Diego Garcia? What's left for them?
Okay, good question. Mauritius keeps the underlying legal title to the land and the territorial sea, seabed, subsoil. That's fundamental. Then there are specific authorities not handed over in that authorization.
Ah, okay.
This is where Mauritius exercises its sovereignty. Things like civil and criminal jurisdiction over its own nationals not part of the forces, or over people totally unconnected to the base.
Like illegal fishing.
Exactly. Illegal fishing, trafficking, things that aren't base business. Mauritius also keeps the right to issue coins, stamps, register births, deaths, marriages for Mauritians or non-base people, licensing unrelated postal services, sovereignty over natural resources like fisheries outside the base area, environmental conservation, regulating commercial activities not related to the base.
Okay, but there's a catch there, right? Didn't you mention something about joint decisions?
Yes, that's a really important point. For some of those retained rights, specifically environmental conservation and regulating non-base commercial activity on Diego Garcia, Mauritius needs a joint decision from the Joint Commission before it can fully exercise them.
The Joint Commission, okay, we'll need to come back to that, but this whole jurisdiction thing sounds layered. How does it actually work day to day? Who enforces what laws?
Annex 2 tries to clarify this.
Hmm.
The UK gets the jurisdiction it needs to run the base. Simple enough. But Mauritius exercises its jurisdiction, civil and criminal, over its own nationals and anyone not connected to the base. Now, here's the interesting bit, where jurisdiction could apply to both. They call it concurrent jurisdiction. The agreement says Mauritius's right is primary.
Primary, so they get first dibs, basically.
In theory, yes. But Mauritius can agree to waive that primary right if the UK thinks it's particularly important for the base, potentially with conditions attached.
Okay.
And another key thing, the UK commits to helping Mauritius with its law enforcement on Diego Garcia, helping with investigations, evidence, arrests, preventing illegal stuff like undocumented migration or illegal fishing by non-base people.
Okay, so it's a really complex mix on Diego Garcia. UK operational control for the base, specific Mauritian rights, some needing joint agreement. What about the rest of the islands, the outer islands of the Chagos Archipelago?
Right, beyond Diego Garcia.
Yeah.
Mauritius is sovereign there too, obviously. And the situation is, well, like constrained by the immediate base needs.
Makes sense.
UK and US military vessels and aircrafts still get unrestricted rights, overflight, navigation, undersea access throughout the whole archipelago for military purposes. Allies operating with them get similar rights, sometimes needing notification.
Okay.
But for certain things beyond Diego Garcia, especially involving other countries, it needs joint decisions between Mauritius and the UK.
Like what?
Managing the electromagnetic spectrum out there, authorizing non-UK, non-US, or non-Mauritian security forces to be present, though there's an exception for urgent humanitarian aid. But even then, they need a joint decision after 30 days. Also, building maritime installations between 12 and 24 nautical miles around Diego Garcia needs joint agreement.
And further out. Or developments on the other islands.
If Mauritius proposes significant developments further out beyond 24 nautical miles, or on the land of the other islands, they have to do what's called a security review.
A security review.
Yeah. The UK gives input on whether it might interfere with the base, they discuss it in the Joint Commission, and, crucially, Mauritius agrees not to go ahead if the UK shows there's a risk to base operations, even after looking at ways to reduce that risk.
Okay, so sovereignty is clear, but there are these detailed operational agreements for the base and these joint controls or review processes elsewhere. Now, what about the people, the Chagosians? The preamble mentions the legacy, the commitment to welfare.
Yes, Article 6 addresses this directly. It explicitly says Mauritius, in exercising its sovereignty, is free to implement a resettlement program.
Resettlement?
Yes, on the islands of the Chagos Archipelago, other than Diego Garcia. Of course, it has to conform with the agreement terms and Mauritian law, but that's a huge statement for the Chagosian community.
That is significant. And the agreement is framed as a full and final resolution of Mauritius's claims. That usually comes with money, right? There's an economic side.
Yes, a substantial one. Article 11 in the letters lay out the financial settlement. It's got three main parts. First, annual payments to Mauritius. GBP 165 million a year for the first 3 years. Then it drops to GBP 120 million a year for the next 10.
Okay, 13 years covered then.
After year 13, it stays at GBP 120 million, but it gets adjusted each year for inflation using the UK's GDP deflator, just a standard UK inflation measure, paid every May.
Got it. What's the second part?
Second, a one-off payment of GBP 40 million. This goes into a trust fund that Mauritius has to set up specifically for the benefit of the Chagosian community.
40 million for a Chagosian trust fund. And third?
Third is long-term development funding for Mauritius itself. GDP 45 million pounds every year for 25 years.
Wow.
Specifically for development projects. And the agreement notes the UK expects its businesses to get involved in those projects where it's practicable.
Those are some very specific long-term financial commitments. So we've got sovereignty, military access, resettlement potential, a big financial package. How on earth do they manage all this, oversee it, especially over such a long period?
That's the job of the Joint Commission. It's set up by Article 12 specifically to facilitate the implementation of the whole agreement.
Okay, the Joint Commission again.
Both sides appoint senior people. And what's really interesting is that the United States has the right to bring issues to the table.
The U.S.?
Yes. And they could designate a representative to attend meetings, give views and advice, especially on things concerning the base operation.
That seems significant.
It is. But the crucial operating principle for the Commission is that all decisions require the agreement of both parties, the UK and Mauritius.
Both have to agree. A potential sticking point.
Could be. It has to meet at least every 6 months. And remember, exercising some of Mauritius's own retained rights on Diego Garcia actually requires a decision by this joint commission, so it's central.
Right, central to making this whole layered system work. What about the lifespan? You mentioned a century, but what's the official duration?
Article 13 says 99 years, initial duration, 99 years from when it enters into force.
99 years.
And there's an option to extend it for another 40 years if they agree on conditions at least 2 years before the 99 years are up. Further extensions possible after that.
And if they don't extend?
If no extension is agreed after the 99 years, or any later period, the agreement terminates. But even then, Mauritius grants the UK a right of first refusal for using Diego Garcia.
First refusal.
Yeah, for 40 years after that initial 99-year term. It means if Mauritius thinks about letting someone else use Diego Garcia, they have to tell the UK first, and the UK gets 6 months to match whatever offer is on the table.
99 years is already immense, and then potentially another 40 years of the UK having first dibs. What if things go really wrong during the 99 years? Can they get out of it? Dispute resolution. Termination.
Okay, disputes first go to the Joint Commission, Article 14. If they can't sort it out, it goes to high-level negotiations. If it involves essential security interests, they can request talks between the prime ministers directly.
And termination. Can Mauritius just walk away?
Article 15 makes that extremely difficult for Mauritius. Termination is only possible on 2 very specific grounds.
Which are?
1, the UK fails to make the required payments. Or 2, there's a serious threat to Mauritius's supreme national interests.
Which means?
The document defines that very strictly. It means an armed attack or a threat of armed attack on Mauritius by the UK, or an armed attack on Mauritius coming directly from the base on Diego Garcia.
So, short of the UK attacking Mauritius.
Pretty much. Short of active war initiated by the UK or directly from the base, Mauritius seems locked in for the full term. And even if Mauritius does invoke those grounds, the UK doesn't have to accept it. They can choose to initiate arbitration.
Arbitration, like a court.
Sort of. A formal legal process with an independent panel to decide if those extreme grounds for termination actually exist. And that panel's decision is final and binding.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it all together, what's the big picture takeaway here?
Well, it's a massive formal step, right? It legally transfers sovereignty of the whole Chagos Archipelago to Mauritius, Diego Garcia included. That's huge. But at the same time, it sets up this incredibly detailed long-term framework.
A framework that lets the UK, and really the US too, keep running that vital military base.
Exactly. Under authorization from Mauritius. It's a really careful balancing act, trying to square historical claims and international law with ongoing strategic needs. It's definitely not a simple handover.
No, it feels more like a complex partnership agreement, a very, very long-term one.
Yeah, you could call it that. A partnership defined by layers of sovereignty, authorization, retained rights.
The Joint Commission needing everyone to agree, the financial settlement. It's like a masterclass in geopolitical Jenga, maybe, trying to keep everything standing.
Huh, maybe. It really tries to address all these interwoven facets: history, security, people, money, environment. It's fascinating to see it all laid out legally. The real test, of course, is how it works in practice.
Especially that Joint Commission.
Absolutely. How they navigate disagreements, how the U.S. involvement plays out. The devil, as always, is in the implementation over the next, well, century.
It definitely gives us a really concrete, detailed look at how these incredibly sensitive international situations get managed, or at least how they're supposed to be managed on paper. Sovereignty, military power, resettlement, money. It's all in there.
Laid out in this unique framework.
So here's something for you, our listener, to chew on. Given this really intricate balance, transferred sovereignty, but this extensive authorized UK-US control on Diego Garcia, how do you think that relationship between Mauritius and the UK will actually evolve over 99 years?
That's a long time for things to change.
Exactly. And what opportunities or maybe what frictions might come out of that joint commission structure where both sides have to agree on so many key things?
Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the UK-Mauritius Chagos Archipelago Agreement. We hope you found this exploration as insightful as we did.